Sabria's hammer rang against the hot metal, a steady rhythm echoing through the forge. Sweat dripped from her brow, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it. She was focused. She was shaping a new kind of blade, a lighter, faster design than her father, Master Blacksmith Arif, had ever allowed. She believed it would be stronger too. "Sabria!" Arif's voice boomed across the forge. "What is this foolishness?" He stood in the doorway, his face dark with disapproval. He pointed a thick finger at the blade she was crafting. "This is not the way we forge in this family. Put it down." Sabria's jaw clenched. "But father, this design is better. It will be stronger. I know it." "Stronger?" Arif scoffed. "You know nothing of strength, girl. Your place is not to design, but to obey." Anger flared within Sabria, hot and quick. She had heard this lecture countless times, always the same. A woman's place was not at the forge. A woman's place was not to innovate. A woman's place was to follow. "I know more than you think," she muttered, her grip tightening on her hammer. "Do not speak to me that way," Arif roared. He stalked toward her, snatching a nearby sword from its display rack. It was his prized possession, a scimitar he had forged for the sheik himself, its blade gleaming with intricate patterns. "Show me this strength you boast of. Break this blade, if you are so capable." Sabria knew he was goading her. She knew she should walk away. But the anger, the frustration of years of being underestimated boiled over. She snatched the scimitar from his hand. With a primal scream, she brought her hammer down on the gleaming blade. The sound of snapping steel echoed through the forge. Arif gasped, his face paling as he stared at the two halves of his prized scimitar lying on the anvil. Sabria stared too, a mixture of horror and defiant satisfaction swirling within her. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken words. Arif's face hardened. He turned and walked away, his back stiff with anger. He returned a moment later, his expression cold and resolute. "You will learn humility, girl," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You will learn that your place is not to challenge, but to obey. I have made arrangements for you to go to Sheik Yazan. You will serve him as he sees fit. Perhaps he can teach you the respect you so sorely lack." Sabria's heart sank. She knew of Sheik Yazan, the ruler of the Oasis fortress. Being sent to serve him was no honor. It was a punishment, a way to break her spirit. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give her father the satisfaction. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with defiance. "So be it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I will go, but I will not break." Sheik Yazan sat in his quiet chambers, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. He traced a finger along the polished hilt of a curved scimitar, admiring the intricate carvings. His chambers were not filled with the usual trappings of power. Instead, they housed a collection of weapons and tools, each one a testament to exquisite craftsmanship. He valued skill above all else, a trait unusual for a ruler. A knock echoed through the room, and a servant entered, bowing low. "Master Blacksmith Arif requests an audience, my lord." Yazan nodded. "Send him in." Arif entered, his face grim, Sabria trailing behind him, her head held high. Yazan's gaze fell upon her. She was young, her eyes flashing with a fire he hadn't seen in many years. He sensed a strength in her, a spirit that intrigued him. "Sheik Yazan," Arif began, his voice stiff with formality, "I bring you a gift, my daughter, Sabria. She has disgraced our family, and I believe a period of service in your household will teach her the humility she so desperately needs." Yazan raised an eyebrow. He had expected a request, a plea for favor perhaps. Not this. He looked at Sabria, who met his gaze unflinchingly. He saw no shame in her eyes, only a quiet defiance. A gift, Yazan repeated, his voice smooth. An interesting offering. Tell me, Sabria, what skills do you possess? Sabria hesitated, glancing at her father, whose face was set in a mask of disapproval. She took a deep breath and spoke. I am a blacksmith, my lord. I have trained in my father's forge since I could walk. Yazan smiled faintly. A blacksmith. Excellent. Perhaps you can then tell me what you think of my collection. He gestured towards the weapons adorning his walls. I pride myself on acquiring only the finest examples of craftsmanship. Arif stiffened. My lord, she is but a novice. Yazan waved a hand, silencing him. Let her speak. Sabria stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the weapons. She walked towards a finely crafted dagger, its hilt inlaid with silver. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. The balance is off, she said, her voice clear. The weight distribution is uneven, making it difficult to wield with precision. She moved to a long, slender sword. This steel, she said, tapping the blade lightly. It's brittle, forged at too high a temperature. It would shatter under pressure. Arif's face flushed with anger, but Yazan's eyes gleamed with amusement. He had not expected such boldness, such keen observation. He picked up his favorite dagger, a simple but elegant blade with a worn leather grip. And this one? He asked, handing it to her. Sabria examined the dagger carefully. The edge is dull, she said, and the metal is showing signs of fatigue. It needs to be reforged. Can you do it? Yazan asked, his voice soft. Sabria met his gaze. Yes, my lord, I can. Yazan smiled. Then consider it your first task. Repair my dagger, Sabria. Show me what you can do. Sabria worked in the palace forge, the heat of the furnace warming her skin. The sheik's dagger lay on the anvil, its dull blade reflecting the flickering flames. She ran a calloused thumb along the edge, assessing the damage. The metal was tired, needing to be coaxed back to life. She selected a hammer, testing its weight in her hand, then began to work. Yazan watched from the doorway, his presence a silent weight in the forge. Sabria tried to ignore him, focusing on the task at hand. She heated the dagger in the furnace, the metal glowing a fiery orange. Then, with precise, practiced movements, she began to hammer, shaping the blade, drawing out its strength. Sparks flew, illuminating the forge in brief bursts of light. Yazan stepped closer, drawn by the rhythmic clang of her hammer against the steel. You have a strong arm, he observed. Sabria nodded, not looking up from her work. It is necessary for a blacksmith. Indeed, Yazan agreed. He watched in silence as she quenched the blade in a bucket of water, the hiss of steam filling the air. My father was a blacksmith, he said after a moment. Sabria glanced at him, surprised. She had not expected the sheik to have such a connection to her craft. He taught me the basics, Yazan continued, the respect for metal, the understanding of its nature. Sabria returned to her work, her hammer ringing against the anvil. She filed the blade, sharpening it, bringing it back to its former glory. The metal speaks to you, Yazan said, his voice quiet. You listen to its whispers. Sabria paused, looking up at him. Yes, she admitted. It tells me its secrets. Yazan smiled. My father used to say the same thing. He watched as Sabria polished the blade, the metal gleaming under her touch. She tested the edge with her thumb, a satisfied nod replacing her usual guarded expression. It is done, she said, offering him the dagger. Yazan took it, turning it over in his hand. The blade was sharp, the hilt secure. It felt new, reborn. You have done well, Sabria, he said, his voice sincere. Better than I expected. Sabria dipped her head, a flicker of warmth spreading through her chest. She had expected mockery, perhaps a cruel test of her skills, but Yazan's praise felt genuine, a recognition of her talent. "You are more than a blacksmith, Sabria," Yazan said, his gaze holding hers. "You are an artist." Sabria looked away, her heart beating faster. She did not trust his kindness. It felt like a trap, a way to lull her into a false sense of security. She had learned to be wary of compliments, especially from those in power. "Thank you, my lord," she murmured, her voice carefully neutral. Yazan smiled faintly. He saw the suspicion in her eyes, the guardedness in her stance. He understood. He knew that trust was not easily given, especially not in her situation. He would have to earn it. "You may go," he said, his voice gentle. "Rest. You have earned it." Sabria bowed her head and turned to leave the forge, the heat of the furnace fading behind her. As she walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that Yazan's kindness was a dangerous game, one she didn't yet understand the rules of. Yazan found Sabria in the palace gardens, sketching designs on a small tablet with a piece of charcoal. She looked up, startled as he approached. He held up a small, intricately carved wooden box. "I thought you might appreciate this," he said, offering it to her. Sabria hesitated, then took the box, her fingers tracing the delicate carvings. She opened it carefully. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a set of finely crafted tools. Small hammers, chisels, files, each one perfectly balanced and gleaming. "These belong to my father," Yazan explained. "He used them when he was apprenticed to the master blacksmith in the city." Sabria's eyes widened. She picked up one of the hammers, testing its weight in her hand. It felt perfect, an extension of her own arm. "He must have been a skilled craftsman," she murmured. Yazan nodded. "He was. He taught me everything I know about metalwork. He used to tell me stories about the different metals, their personalities, their strengths and weaknesses." He sat beside her on the low stone wall, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the gardens. "He believed that a true craftsman could hear the metal whisper its secrets," Yazan said, a wistful smile on his face. Sabria looked at him, surprised. "My father always said that was nonsense," she confessed, a small smile playing on her lips. "He said a blacksmith's job was to shape the metal, not to listen to it." Yazan chuckled. "Your father sounds like a practical man." "He is," Sabria agreed. "Too practical sometimes. He refuses to see any value in new ideas, new techniques. He believes the old ways are always the best ways." She sighed, her smile fading. "He never understood my desire to experiment, to try new things. He always said a woman's place was not to innovate, but to obey." Yazan listened patiently, his gaze fixed on her face. He saw the frustration in her eyes, the yearning for something more. "I understand," he said softly. "My father was not always supportive of my own interests. He wanted me to focus on ruling, on politics. But my heart was always drawn to the forge." He picked up a small chisel from the box, turning it over in his fingers. "He eventually came to understand," Yazan continued. "He saw the joy it brought me, the passion I had for crafting. He even commissioned me to forge a ceremonial dagger for him." Sabria looked at him, her eyes widening. "Did you?" Yazan nodded. "It took me months, but I finished it. It wasn't perfect, but he treasured it until the day he died." He offered the box of tools to Sabria again. "These are yours now," he said. "Use them well. Honor the metal, listen to its whispers, and create something beautiful." Sabria took the box, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked at Yazan, a warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time since arriving at the palace, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this place, this sheik, was not what she had initially believed. Perhaps, just perhaps, She had found someone who understood her, someone who valued her skills, not just her obedience. The rhythmic clang of Sabria's hammer became a familiar sound in the palace forge. She worked tirelessly, repairing damaged weapons, sharpening blades, and even crafting a few new pieces based on her own designs. Yazan often visited her, watching her work, asking questions about her techniques. They spoke of different metals, of forging methods, of the balance and strength of a well-crafted blade. A quiet understanding grew between them, a shared passion for the art of metalworking. But their growing connection did not go unnoticed. Whispers began to circulate among the court. The tribe elders, men with weathered faces and deep-set eyes, watched Sabria with suspicion. They saw her not as a skilled craftswoman, but as a blacksmith's daughter, a woman who had broken tradition by entering the palace, by gaining the sheik's ear. One evening, as Sabria was leaving the forge, two elders approached her. "The sheik's time is precious," one of them said, his voice stern. "He should not be distracted by the whims of a blacksmith's daughter." Sabria bristled. "I am not distracting him," she retorted. "I am working, repairing his weapons, ensuring the safety of the oasis." The other elder shook his head. "Your place is not here," he said. "You should return to your father's forge, where you belong." Sabria's jaw clenched. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she knew it would be futile. The elders' minds were made up. They saw her as a threat, a disruption to the established order. She walked away, their words echoing in her ears. She went to her chambers, her heart heavy. She thought of her father, of his stubborn refusal to even acknowledge her presence in the palace. She had sent him several messages, hoping to mend their fractured relationship, but he had not replied. He remained silent, his pride wounded, his anger simmering. Sabria sat on her bed, staring out the window at the starlit desert sky. Doubt gnawed at her. Was she wrong to be here? Was she causing more harm than good? Perhaps the elders were right. Perhaps she should leave, return to her father's forge, even if it meant giving up the freedom and recognition she had found in the palace. She picked up the box of tools Yazan had given her, her fingers tracing the smooth wood. She thought of his kindness, his understanding, his shared passion for metalworking. She thought of the work she had done in the palace forge, the weapons she had repaired, the new designs she had created. She realized that leaving would mean giving up not just Yazan's support, but also her own dreams, her own aspirations. The decision weighed heavily on her heart. She closed her eyes, trying to find the answer within herself. Should she stay and fight for her place in the palace, or should she leave and return to the familiar yet stifling confines of her father's world? The elders of the tribe gathered in Yazan's chambers, their faces grim. They sat in a circle, their silence heavy with unspoken disapproval. Yazan stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the distant sand dunes, his mind troubled. "Sheikh Yazan," Elder Omar began, his voice deep and resonant, "we have come to speak of a matter of grave concern." Yazan turned to face them, his expression unreadable. "Speak your minds, elders. It is the blacksmith's daughter, Sabria," Elder Hakim said, his voice laced with disapproval. "Her presence in the palace is disrupting the established order." "Disrupting?" Yazan repeated, his voice calm. "She is a skilled craftswoman. She is repairing our weapons, strengthening our defenses." "Her skills are not in question," Elder Omar countered. "It is her position, her influence over you that concerns us. It is not fitting for a blacksmith's daughter to hold such sway over the sheik." "She holds no sway over me," Yazan said, his voice tightening. "She is a valuable member of my household, nothing more. Her presence is causing unrest among the people. Elder Hakim insisted. They whisper of impropriety, of undue influence. It is damaging your reputation, Sheikh Yazan. Yazan sighed, running a hand through his hair. He knew the elder's concerns were not entirely unfounded. Sabria's presence in the palace was unusual, a break from tradition, but he also knew that she was a gifted craftswoman, her skills invaluable to the oasis. He valued her knowledge, her independent spirit, her unwavering dedication to her craft. He found himself drawn to her strength, her fiery passion, her quiet defiance. "I understand your concerns," Yazan said, his voice measured. "But Sabria has done nothing wrong. She has earned her place in the palace through her skill and hard work. Tradition dictates that a woman's place is in the home, not in the forge, not in the sheikh's chambers," Elder Omar said, his voice firm. "Tradition also dictates that we value skill and loyalty above all else," Yazan countered. "Sabria has proven both." The elders exchanged glances, their disapproval evident. Elder Omar stepped forward, his eyes meeting Yazan's. "We implore you, Sheikh Yazan, to reconsider. Distance yourself from this woman before she brings further dishonor upon your name." Yazan felt a pang of guilt. He knew the elders spoke out of concern for him, for the well-being of the oasis. But he could not bring himself to dismiss Sabria, to cast her aside simply to appease tradition. He was torn. He valued the wisdom of the elders, the stability of tradition, but he also valued Sabria, her unique spirit, her undeniable talent. He knew he had a difficult decision to make, one that would have far-reaching consequences. He looked at the elders, their faces etched with worry, and then he looked out the window towards the forge where he knew Sabria was working, her hammer ringing against the anvil, shaping metal, shaping her own destiny. He knew he could not simply dismiss her, not without a fight. Arif, master blacksmith, stood in the bustling marketplace, his usual air of authority diminished. He overheard whispers, snippets of conversation that made his blood boil. "The sheikh favors the blacksmith's daughter," one merchant murmured to another. "She has him wrapped around her little finger." Arif's jaw clenched. His daughter Sabria, the rebellious child he had sent away in disgrace, was now the subject of gossip, her name linked with the sheikh's. He felt a surge of anger, not just at Sabria, but at himself. He had thought sending her away would teach her humility, break her defiant spirit. Instead, it seemed she had used her cunning to manipulate the sheikh, to gain influence and power. His pride, already wounded by her defiance, now felt deeply bruised. He imagined her, wielding her newfound influence, whispering lies into Yazan's ear, twisting his words, poisoning his mind against her own father. The thought was unbearable. He stormed back to his forge, the whispers following him like shadows. He grabbed a piece of parchment and a charcoal stick, his hand trembling with anger. He wrote a short, sharp message, each word dripping with resentment. "You have brought shame upon our family," he wrote. "You have used your wiles to deceive the sheikh. I will not speak to you, I will not acknowledge you, until you return home and beg for my forgiveness." He sealed the message with a drop of hot wax, his anger still burning hot within him. He called for his youngest apprentice, a scrawny boy who looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "Take this to the palace," Arif commanded, thrusting the message into the boy's hands. "Deliver it directly to Sabria, and do not return until you have done so." The boy nodded quickly and scurried away, eager to escape the blacksmith's wrath. Arif watched him go, his heart heavy with a mixture of anger, pride, and a flicker of something he refused to acknowledge as regret. Sabria's hands trembled as she unfolded the small piece of parchment. The words blurred as she read, her father's anger radiating from the page like heat from a forge. Shame, deceit, forgiveness. The words struck her like blows, each one chipping away at the fragile hope she had begun to nurture. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the harsh script. She had tried to reach out to her father, to mend their broken bond. But his silence, his unwavering disapproval, had been a constant ache in her heart. Now, this message, this accusation of manipulation and deceit, felt like a final crushing blow. She crumpled the parchment in her fist, the sharp edges digging into her palm. She wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all, but the sound that escaped her lips was a choked sob. Yazan found her in the gardens, her shoulders shaking with silent grief. He sat beside her, his presence a quiet comfort in the gathering dusk. He gently took her hand, his thumb stroking the back of her clenched fist. "What troubles you, Sabria?" he asked, his voice soft. Sabria hesitated, then unfurled the crumpled parchment, offering it to him. He read the message, his brow furrowing with concern. He looked at her, his eyes filled with compassion. "Your father is a proud man," he said gently. "He does not understand." "He thinks I am manipulating you," Sabria whispered, her voice thick with tears. "He thinks I am using you to gain power." Yazan shook his head. "He is wrong, Sabria. I see your strength, your skill, your passion. I value your counsel, your knowledge. I do not need to be manipulated to recognize your worth." He took her hand in his grip firm and reassuring. "Do not let his words break you, Sabria. You are stronger than he thinks." Sabria pulled her hand away, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and defiance. "It doesn't matter what you think," she said, her voice trembling. "The elders disapprove of me. My father disowns me. I have no place here." "You have a place here, Sabria," Yazan insisted. "You have earned it." "No," Sabria said, shaking her head. "I am a blacksmith's daughter. My place is in the forge, not in the palace. I cannot stay here, not anymore." Yazan reached for her again, but she pulled away, rising to her feet. "Please, leave me alone," she whispered, turning and fleeing into the shadows of the garden, leaving Yazan sitting alone, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. The elder's words echoed in his mind, their warnings about Sabria's disruptive presence, their insistence that he distance himself from her. He felt the pressure mounting, the weight of tradition bearing down on him, threatening to crush not only his growing affection for Sabria, but also his own authority as sheik. A chill wind swept across the desert, carrying whispers of unrest. Riders arrived at the oasis, their faces grim, their horses lathered and weary. They brought news of a rival tribe, the Banu Khalid, massing their forces at the edge of Yazan's territory. The Banu Khalid, known for their fierce warriors and insatiable thirst for power, had long coveted the fertile oasis. Now it seemed they were finally making their move. The news spread through the palace like wildfire, igniting fear and uncertainty. The guards doubled their patrols, their faces tense, their hands gripping their weapons. The servants hurried about their duties, their whispers echoing through the corridors. Even the air seemed to crackle with tension. Sabria felt the shift in the atmosphere, the palpable sense of dread that hung over the oasis. She saw the fear in the eyes of the servants, the grim determination on the faces of the guards. She knew that war was coming, a storm gathering on the horizon, threatening to engulf them all. She went to the forge, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of her hammer against the anvil. But even there, the whispers of war followed her. The other smiths, usually jovial and boisterous, worked in silence, their faces etched with worry. One of the older smiths, a man named Omar, approached her. "Have you heard the news, Sabria?" he asked, his voice low. Sabria nodded. "The Banu Khalid are coming." Omar sighed, shaking his head. "They are a ruthless tribe. They will not show mercy." Sabria thought of Yazan, of his kindness, his quiet strength. She thought of the oasis, of its lush gardens, its bustling marketplace, its peaceful inhabitants. She knew that the Banu Khalid would destroy everything, leaving nothing but ruin and despair in their wake. A fierce determination hardened her heart. She would not let that happen. She would not stand by and watch as everything she had come to cherish was torn apart. She would fight. She would use her skills, her knowledge, her passion to protect the oasis, to protect Yazan. She turned to Omar, her eyes flashing with resolve. "We need to prepare," she said, her voice firm. "We need to forge weapons, strengthen our defenses. We need to be ready for them." Omar looked at her, surprised by her sudden intensity. He saw the fire in her eyes, the unwavering determination in her stance. He nodded slowly. "You are right, Sabria," he said. "We will do whatever it takes to protect our home." Sabria gathered the other smiths, her voice ringing through the forge. "The Banu Khalid are coming," she announced, her words echoing Omar's earlier statement. "They threaten our homes, our families, our way of life. We will not let them win. We will forge weapons, stronger and sharper than any they have ever seen. We will arm our warriors, and we will defend our oasis." The smiths, inspired by her passion, her unwavering resolve, responded with a roar of agreement. They grabbed their hammers, their tongs, their chisels, their faces alight with a shared purpose. The forge, usually a place of quiet industry, now thrummed with a new energy, a shared sense of urgency. The rhythmic clang of hammers against anvils filled the air, a defiant symphony of steel, a promise of resistance against the gathering storm. Sabria paced the length of the forge, the flickering firelight dancing across her determined face. The smiths worked tirelessly, their hammers ringing against the anvils, but Sabria knew it wasn't enough. They were forging weapons, yes, but not fast enough. The Banu Khalid were approaching, and the oasis needed to be ready. She stopped before a cooling rack, her gaze fixed on a newly forged sword. It was a good blade, strong and sharp, but it had taken too long to make. They needed a faster way, a more efficient method. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind, a memory of a technique she had experimented with in her father's forge. It was a risky method, one that her father had dismissed as foolish, but she believed it could work. It involved folding the metal multiple times, layering it, creating a blade that was both stronger and lighter, and most importantly, quicker to forge. She turned to the smiths, her voice ringing with authority. "Stop!" she commanded. The hammers fell silent, the smiths turning to face her, their faces questioning. "We are not working fast enough," Sabria declared. "We need to change our methods." She explained her idea, the innovative folding technique that could potentially double their output. Some of the smiths looked doubtful, their faces etched with concern. "It is untested," Omar said, his voice hesitant. "It could weaken the blades." "It will make them stronger," Sabria insisted, her voice filled with conviction. "And faster. We don't have time to forge each blade in the traditional way. We must take this risk." She looked at them, her eyes blazing with passion. "Do you trust me?" she asked. The smiths hesitated for a moment. Then Omar stepped forward, his face resolute. "We trust you, Sabria," he said. "Lead us." The other smiths nodded in agreement, their doubts replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Sabria grabbed a piece of steel, placing it in the furnace. "I will show you," she said. "Watch closely." She heated the metal until it glowed a fiery orange, then began to hammer, folding the steel over and over, layering it, drawing out its strength. Sparks flew, illuminating the forge in a shower of light. The smiths watched, mesmerized as she worked, her movements precise, her focus unwavering. When she was finished, she quenched the blade in a bucket of water, the hiss of steam filling the air. She held up the finished blade, the metal gleaming under the forge's firelight. It was lighter, thinner, but somehow stronger, more resilient. "Now you try," she said, handing the blade to Omar. Together, we will forge enough weapons to defend our oasis." The smiths, energized by her demonstration, by her unwavering belief in her innovative technique, returned to their work with a renewed vigor. The forge came alive once more, the rhythmic clang of hammers echoing through the night, a testament to their shared determination, their shared hope, their shared fight for survival. Arif stood hidden in the shadows of the date palms, his gaze fixed on the bustling activity within the palace forge. He had heard rumors of Sabria's influence, of her unusual methods, and he had come to see for himself. He watched as she moved among the smiths, her voice ringing with authority, her hands demonstrating a new, unfamiliar technique. She heated the metal, then hammered it, folding and layering it with a speed and precision that astonished him. He had never seen such a method, such innovation. He had always dismissed her eagerness to experiment, her desire to break from tradition. Now he watched as the other smiths, men he knew to be skilled and experienced, followed her instructions, their hammers echoing hers in a rhythmic symphony of steel. He saw the respect in their eyes, the trust they placed in her leadership. He watched as they produced blade after blade, each one lighter, stronger, and forged in a fraction of the time it would have taken using the traditional methods. He realized, with a pang of both pride and regret, that she had surpassed him. His daughter, the rebellious girl he had cast aside, had become a master smith, an innovator, a leader. He had sent her away to teach her humility, to break her spirit. Instead, she had flourished, her talent blossoming under the sheik's patronage. He had clung to the old ways, the familiar methods, while she had embraced change, pushing the boundaries of their craft. He had called her foolish, defiant, disrespectful. Now, he saw that she was simply brilliant. He had tried to control her, to confine her, but her spirit, like the metal she shaped, had proved too strong, too resilient. He thought of the harsh words he had written, the accusations of deceit and manipulation. He realized, with a growing sense of shame, that he had been wrong. She had not manipulated the sheik. She had earned his respect, his admiration, through her own skill and hard work. He had judged her harshly, blinded by his own pride, his own fear of being surpassed. He watched as she picked up a finished blade, the firelight glinting off its polished surface. It was a masterpiece, a testament to her talent, her vision. He knew then that he had to make amends, to acknowledge her skill, to ask for her forgiveness. He took a step forward, then hesitated, his pride still holding him back. He watched her a moment longer, her face illuminated by the forge's glow, her spirit shining brighter than any flame. He knew he had a long way to go, but he also knew with a certainty that settled deep within his heart that he had to try. Yazan stood on the ramparts of the fortress, the desert wind whipping his robes around him. The setting sun cast long shadows across the sand, painting the dunes in hues of orange and purple. He watched as his men prepared for battle, sharpening their swords, checking their bows, their faces grim but resolute. The news of the Banu Khalid's approach had spread through the oasis, casting a pall of fear over the usually bustling marketplace. But fear had also ignited a spark of defiance, a determination to protect their home, their families, their way of life. He turned his gaze towards the forge, the glow of the furnace a beacon in the gathering darkness. He could hear the rhythmic clang of hammers, the steady beat of Sabria's innovation echoing through the night. He had watched her over the past few days, her tireless energy, her unwavering focus, her ability to inspire the other smiths. She had transformed the forge, injecting it with a new energy, a renewed sense of purpose. She had taken a risk, embracing a new technique, and it had paid off. The weapons they were producing were lighter, stronger, and forged at a speed that had astonished even the most experienced smiths. He admired her resourcefulness, her courage, her unwavering belief in her own abilities. He descended from the ramparts and made his way towards the forge, his footsteps echoing in the quiet courtyard. He entered the forge, the heat of the furnace washing over him, the rhythmic clang of hammers, a steady pulse in the air. Sabria stood by the anvil, her face streaked with soot, her eyes bright with intensity. She paused in her work, her gaze meeting his. A silent understanding passed between them, a shared recognition of the danger they faced, the weight of responsibility they both carried. "They are coming," Yazan said, his voice quiet. Sabria nodded, her expression grim. "We will be ready." He watched as she picked up a newly forged sword, testing its edge with a calloused thumb. "These blades are good," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "Stronger than any I have seen." "They will protect us," Sabria said, her voice firm. He stepped closer, his gaze holding hers. "And you, Sabria," he said softly, "how will you protect yourself?" Sabria met his gaze, her eyes flashing with a familiar fire. "I will fight alongside my people," she said, her voice unwavering. "I will defend our home." Yazan smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. He had seen her strength in the forge, her ability to command respect, to inspire loyalty. He knew she would be a formidable ally in the coming battle. He reached out, gently touching her cheek, his thumb brushing away a smudge of soot. "Be careful, Sabria," he said, his voice laced with concern. Sabria nodded, her gaze softening for a moment before hardening again with resolve. "You as well, my lord," she replied. He turned to leave, the weight of the impending battle settling heavily on his shoulders. But as he walked away, he felt a flicker of hope, a sense of confidence he hadn't felt before. He knew that the Banu Khalid were a formidable foe, but he also knew that he had something they didn't, Sabria. Her ingenuity, her courage, her unwavering spirit had given them a fighting chance, a reason to believe that they could withstand the coming storm. He looked back at her one last time, her silhouette outlined against the fiery glow of the forge, a symbol of resilience, of defiance, of hope. He knew with a certainty that settled deep within his heart that they would face the coming battle together, side by side, their shared determination forging a bond stronger than any steel. The first rays of dawn painted the desert sky in hues of blood, orange and dusty rose, as the war cries of the Banu Khalid shattered the morning calm. They surged towards the oasis like a desert storm, a wave of horsemen brandishing swords and spears, their faces hidden behind fierce war masks. Yazan stood on the ramparts, his hand resting on the hilt of his scimitar, his gaze fixed on the approaching enemy. He turned to his men, his voice calm but resolute. "Defend our home," he commanded. The gates of the fortress swung open, and Yazan's warriors charged out, their swords flashing in the morning light. The clash of steel echoed through the air as the two forces collided, a whirlwind of horses, men, and flashing blades. Yazan, armed with his reforged dagger and a scimitar, plunged into the thick of the battle, his movements fluid and precise. He parried a blow, ducked under a swinging sword, and lunged forward, his blade finding its mark. Sabria, clad in leather armor and wielding a short sword and a hammer, fought alongside him, her movements as swift and deadly as a desert viper. She moved with a ferocity that surprised even the seasoned warriors around her, her hammer crushing shields, her sword finding gaps in the enemy's armor. The battle raged, the air thick with the smell of blood and sweat, the ground littered with broken weapons and fallen bodies. Yazan and Sabria fought back to back, a whirlwind of steel and fury, their combined strength holding back the tide of the enemy advance. Yazan saw a Banu Khalid warrior charging towards Sabria, his sword raised high. He lunged forward, intercepting the blow, his scimitar deflecting the enemy's blade. He pressed his attack, forcing the warrior back, creating an opening for Sabria. She seized the opportunity, her hammer crashing down on the warrior's shield, shattering it, leaving him vulnerable. Her sword followed a swift, precise thrust that found its mark. The battle swayed back and forth, neither side gaining a clear advantage. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down on the exhausted warriors. Yazan felt a sharp pain in his side as a spear grazed his ribs. He staggered back, his breath catching in his throat. Sabria saw his injury and moved to protect him, her hammer whirling, deflecting blows meant for him. "Go!" Yazan gasped, pushing her away. "I can hold them here. Go and rally the others." Sabria hesitated, her eyes filled with concern. But she knew he was right. She needed to help organize the defense, to ensure that the oasis did not fall. She nodded, her gaze meeting his. "Be careful, Yazan," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of worry and determination. She turned and ran towards the fortress, her heart pounding in her chest, the sounds of battle echoing behind her. She knew that the fate of the oasis, the fate of Yazan, rested on her shoulders. She would not fail. The battle raged, a whirlwind of dust and steel. A momentary lull fell over the battlefield, a brief respite in the furious clash. Yazan leaned against a crumbling wall, clutching his side, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Sabria stood before him, her sword dripping with blood, her eyes scanning the battlefield for any sign of renewed attack. A figure emerged from the swirling dust, his face familiar yet changed. It was Arif, master blacksmith, his usual air of authority replaced by a hesitant uncertainty. He approached them slowly, his gaze fixed on Sabria. He stopped a few paces away, his hands trembling slightly. "Sabria," he began, his voice rough, I have something to say." Sabria looked at him, her expression guarded. She had not spoken to her father since arriving at the palace, his silence a constant ache in her heart. "I was wrong," Arif continued, his gaze dropping to the ground. "I was wrong to send you away. It wasn't anger that drove me, Sabria. It was fear." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. "I was afraid," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "Afraid of your talent, afraid of being surpassed." He gestured towards the battlefield, towards the warriors wielding the blades she had forged. "I saw what you did in the forge, Sabria," he said, his voice filled with a newfound respect. "The way you led the smiths, the way you innovated, the way you surpassed me." He took a step closer, his gaze holding hers. "I was jealous, Sabria," he admitted. "Jealous of your skill, your vision, your strength." He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing against her cheek. "I am sorry, Sabria," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry for the pain I have caused you." Sabria stared at him, her eyes wide with surprise. She had expected anger, accusations, perhaps even more rejection. But this apology, this confession of fear and jealousy, was something she had never anticipated. I don't understand," she stammered. Arif looked at Yazan, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I saw you fighting side by side," he said. "I saw the respect you have for her, the love." He turned back to Sabria, his gaze softening. "He sees your worth, Sabria," he said, "and so do I. You are a true master smith, a gifted craftswoman, and I am proud to call you my daughter." He looked from Sabria to Yazan, his voice gaining strength. "I give you my blessing," he said, his words echoing across the battlefield. "May your union be strong, and may your future be filled with happiness." The tide of the battle turned. Bolstered by the lighter, stronger weapons forged under Sabria's guidance, Yazan's warriors pushed back against the Banu Khalid. The enemy, weary and demoralized by the unexpected resistance, began to falter. Their initial ferocity waned, replaced by a growing sense of desperation. Seeing their advantage slipping away, the Banu Khalid leader signaled a retreat, his warriors melting back into the desert as quickly as they had appeared. The remaining Banu Khalid warriors scattered, leaving behind a trail of broken weapons and the silent testament of their defeat. A weary cheer rose from Yazan's warriors as they watched the enemy disappear into the swirling dust. The battle was won. The oasis was safe. Yazan, his side bandaged, stood beside Sabria, watching the retreating figures. He reached out, taking her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "We did it, Sabria," he said, his voice hoarse but filled with gratitude. Sabria nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Together," she whispered. Arif approached them, his face etched with a mixture of pride and humility. He looked at Sabria, his gaze holding hers. "You saved us, Sabria," he said, his voice sincere. "Your skill, your courage, you saved us all." He turned to Yazan, his voice gaining strength. "I was wrong about you, Sheikh Yazan," he admitted. "You are a wise and just ruler. You saw Sabria's worth when I could not." He looked from Sabria to Yazan, his hand resting on Sabria's shoulder. "You have my blessing," he repeated, his voice filled with emotion. "May your union be strong, and may your future be filled with happiness." Sabria looked at her father, tears welling in her eyes. His words, his acceptance, meant more to her than any victory. She reached out, taking his hand, her grip just as firm as Yazan's. "Thank you, Father," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The years of misunderstanding, the hurt and resentment seemed to melt away in that moment, replaced by a newfound sense of connection, of forgiveness, of love. Yazan watched them, his heart filled with warmth. He saw the bond between father and daughter, the healing that had taken place amidst the chaos of battle. He knew that the oasis had not only survived a war, but had also witnessed the rebirth of a family, the forging of a new beginning. He looked at Sabria, her face radiant in the aftermath of victory, and he knew with a certainty that settled deep within his heart that their future together would be as strong and enduring as the metal she so skillfully shaped. The wedding celebration filled the oasis with music, laughter, and the aroma of roasted lamb and sweet dates. Yazan, dressed in a richly embroidered robe, stood beside Sabria, who wore a gown of deep crimson, her hair adorned with silver ornaments. Arif, his face beaming with pride, stood nearby, accepting congratulations from the villagers. The elders, their initial disapproval forgotten in the wake of Sabria's heroism and her father's reconciliation, offered their blessings to the newly married couple. After the festivities, Yazan led Sabria to the palace forge, the place where their connection had first been forged. "I have a gift for you, my wife," he said, his voice soft. He presented her with a scroll tied with a silken cord. Sabria unrolled it, her eyes widening as she read the inscription. It was an official decree, appointing her as chief weaponsmith of the oasis, a position never before held by a woman. But this has always been a man's role," Sabria stammered, her voice filled with surprise. Yazan smiled. "Tradition is important, Sabria," he said, "but sometimes tradition must make way for progress." He took her hand, his gaze holding hers. "You have proven your skill, your leadership, your vision. You are the best smith in the oasis, regardless of gender." Sabria's heart swelled with gratitude and a newfound sense of responsibility. She looked at Yazan, her eyes shining with determination. "I will not disappoint you," she said, her voice firm. And she didn't. As chief weaponsmith, Sabria transformed the palace forge. She implemented her innovative folding technique, increasing production and creating weapons of unparalleled strength and lightness. She modernized the forge, introducing new tools and techniques she had learned during her years of experimentation. She opened the forge to apprentices of all genders, sharing her knowledge and passion with anyone who showed an aptitude for metalworking. She and Yazan ruled the oasis together, their marriage a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared love for their craft. They often worked side by side in the forge, their hammers ringing in unison, their shared passion forging a bond stronger than any steel. Years passed, and the oasis flourished under their leadership. The forge became renowned throughout the land, attracting skilled craftspeople from far and wide. Sabria's innovative techniques were adopted by smiths across the desert, transforming the art of metalworking. She and Yazan had not only defended their home from a hostile threat, but they had also forged a new era of prosperity and innovation for the oasis. One evening, as the sun set over the desert, casting long shadows across the sand, Yazan and Sabria stood hand in hand on the ramparts of the fortress, looking out at the peaceful oasis. The sounds of laughter and music drifted up from the marketplace, a testament to the prosperity they had created. They looked at each other, their eyes reflecting the shared journey they had taken, the challenges they had overcome, the future they had forged together. Their hands, calloused and strong from years of working with metal, remained clasped tightly, a symbol of their enduring bond, a promise of a future as bright and enduring as the desert stars above.